What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Congratulations if you made the playoffs. Week 15 is here. If you didn't make the playoffs, maybe you're still fighting in a 10-team league, or maybe you're eliminated and you're just hanging out. We appreciate you. Welcome in. Adam Azer, Dave Richard, and Jamie Eisenberg. Guess what? It's a week where there's a lot of quarterbacks with great matchups on the waiver wire, but a lot of them stink. A lot of them are pretty bad. So can you trust Aaron Rodgers this week, or Will Levis if he plays, or Cooper Rush? We'll talk about that. How we doing? We in a good mood, Dave? We make a lot of playoffs?
I did. I cut down on my leagues this year. I've talked about it. 13 leagues. I made the playoffs in 10 of the 13.
Oh,
That's awesome.
That's terrific. Jamie, what was your rate?
29 redraft leagues, 19 of 29 in the playoffs.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a little embarrassed. I'm not even going to say that. 5 of 11 for me. Very disappointing.
5 championships. Well, how many of those leagues are you in with me before we give you 5 championships? Maybe not 5.
We all made it in the FFT league. And I think that's
cool.
the only league that I'm in with you. Are you still in the IDP league?
No.
One of the leagues I not in my leagues. So, it was actually pretty good. Again, the streak continues. No last place finishes. Never happened. All right. So listen, yesterday was a crazy day. Well, the week, Sunday and Monday, crazy days, big scores. Got an email from someone who said, I got a crazy fantasy story comeback I want to share with you guys. 2 of my friends are in a league together. They played each other. Team A was 7-6, Team B was 6-7, and Team A was up 110.4 points going into the week on Team B, and they were facing each other. Team B won by 110.6, beat the crap out of Team A, beat his friend by 110.6, got the point differential by 0.2 points, and is in the league. So I've seen a lot of stories like this. That's really cool. And now we have to help you with week 15 and week 16 if you have a bye. So here we go. Top 3 waiver wire priorities. Jamie, who do we got?
It's a little messy at running back with the injuries, and there are some guys that could help you. So that's probably the best place to go. But I do think that Adam Thielen should be added across the board. I mean, when we said it last week that he should be added, and he exceeded my expectations by leaps and bounds what he did against Philadelphia. So 2 back-to-back amazing games. He's easily the number 1 player to pick up and potentially start this week as they take on a Dallas defense that just lost another player to injury against the Bengals. So he's number 1. After him, I think the safest options are, but the best options are probably the 2 running backs that you could use as potential starters this week, certainly as flex options. Looks like Isaac Arendo is going to miss the Thursday night game against the Rams, so Patrick Taylor's next man up. Could be at least a flex option against a Los Angeles defense that has struggled against the run lately. And then Sincere McCormick, if he gets the start again for the Raiders, another potential flex play. You could throw Isaiah Davis in the conversation if you want to also, but it feels like that could be still a messy situation because Breece Hall could return, and you have still both guys basically splitting snaps evenly. Davis got the touchdown. Allen still had very good numbers. They were similar in terms of what their touches were. So I think it's Thielen, and then pick your 2 favorite running backs.
Thielen, Patrick Taylor, Sincere McCormick, maybe a Jets running back, or which in most leagues would be Isaiah Davis, as Braylon Allen is rostered in about 84% of leagues, something like that. Dave, who are your top 3 priorities?
Taylor's at the top for me just because it's opportunity. We think that he'll be the primary running back for the 49ers. He's not a great talent. There's a reason why he was 3rd/4th string. I guess it's 4th string in San Francisco, but here he is with fresh legs on a short week against a Rams defense that just got ran over, not literally run over by Buffalo. They got thrown over by Buffalo, ran over by Josh Allen. But I think he's going to have a shot at 15 touches, and I do think he's got a good opportunity. So unless I am in need, I need somebody for George Pickens, I need somebody because I'm not happy with my wide receivers, or if I can't get my hands on Hunter Henry, Taylor's going to be number 1. Thielen's number 2. Hunter Henry, I just said his name. He's available in 39% of leagues on CBS. I'm sure a lot of people dropped him because of the bye week, but we know what his track record has been with Drake May. I would gravitate back to him as a low-end top 12 fantasy tight end. That's my top 3. Taylor, Thielen, Henry.
So Taylor and Thielen for both of you. Hunter Henry for Dave. And Hunter Henry is the number 1 tight end for Jamie. So I don't think there's going to be a disagreement there, but Jamie just mentioned Sincere McCormick. Does Hunter Henry's matchup scare you? The Cardinals have been really good against tight ends this year.
I
No,
mean, it does to a certain extent, but again, you're still talking about a guy that's been uber targeted and has a chance to be, a top 12 tight end. I mean, think about the guys that we're talking about here. When you get past the top 4 or 5 guys, Jonnu Smith just had a game after that 3-week stretch where he needed overtime to get all of his catches, yards, and his touchdown. So is he safe? Probably ahead of this group. But then you get to Tucker Kraft and Sam Laporta and Zach Ertz, and that's where Hunter Henry belongs. So I think he's definitely worth starting. Is he going to have a great game? Is Drake May going to have a great game? This Cardinals defense has been really good. They got run all over last week by Seattle, and that's really been their only flaw in basically the last month. So aside from maybe Ramondre Stevenson, picking up from where Zach Charbonnet left off, which I doubt, I think it's going to be tough for him, but you're still probably starting him in more cases than not.
You're not joking. He is uber targeted, 8+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games, and at least 9.4 PPR points in each of those games. So uber targeted, and he's giving your fantasy team quite a lift.
I get it. That's Hunter Henry we're talking about here. And then let's just talk a little bit more about Patrick Taylor. It's a Thursday game, which complicates things for Isaac Orendo. They're facing the Rams, who allow 4.6 yards per carry to running backs. Have mostly been solid against running backs, but two of the last 3 running backs, Barkley scored about 46 points. Kamara had a big game. He ran for 112 yards. Then James Cook, of course, 6 carries for 20 yards. We'll call it a favorable matchup.
But Josh Allen had what, 3 rushing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns in that game?
Does that really matter?
Well, I mean, I know at least one was short area, so that could certainly where, Taylor comes into play.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's certainly not a matchup you're running away from. It might be a really good matchup here. He had 7 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown against the Bears. There's also Israel Abanikanda, Keyshawn Vaughn in the potential.
Yeah, I want to talk about Abanikanda later.
I mean, I think we should talk about it now. I mean, how big of a priority? Okay. If you are feeling good about your running backs, do you pick up Patrick Taylor, or do you only do it if you're feeling desperate? And where are you ranking him? And for the record, as we sit here at 9:20 a.m. on Tuesday, they have not ruled out Orendo. He said it was precautionary leaving the game. We are not expecting him, but it is not conclusive that he's out this week yet. So we have to pay attention to the practice report today. But Dave, where are you ranking Patrick Taylor this week?
He'll end up being a borderline number 2, number 3 fantasy running back. And it's like I said, it's based on opportunity. Will he be the only running back up for the 49ers? Of course not. That's where I think Abanikanda, I don't know how the coaches feel about him and how acclimated he is to this offense. They also have Keyshawn Vaughn, but he's been a Jag pretty much his entire career.
But he knows the offense.
I don't know how they can sort out those guys. But Taylor does have some passing downs work under his belt as well as rushing. And so I don't mind him I don't mind any running back for the Niners in general. But if it's somebody with fresh legs who's going to get the opportunity, I keep saying that word, that's what matters here. And so what type of scenario would I have to be in where I would pass over Taylor on my playoff bound team? I guess it would have to be I'm loaded at running back where I don't need to add to my depth and I don't need to play keep away from my opponent. And as long as it's those 2 things, then maybe I won't make that big move toward Taylor. But what if Orendo misses multiple weeks and Taylor's the lead back for the 49ers rest of season? That would be pretty interesting. I'd like to have that guy on my team.
That's I think the biggest caveat is if you think you're getting the starting running back for the 49ers, you should be adding that regardless. But I think if you're playing keep away and you have the opportunity to keep a player away from your opponent, I would much rather have my opponent starting the 5th string running back, because let's not forget Elijah Mitchell was part of the rotation when they started camp. The 5th string running back for the 49ers, as opposed to what Thielen has done the last 2 weeks. So if you're saying, okay, you could plug one of these 2 guys in as a flex, I am much rather.
Yeah.
I feel much more safer saying, okay, you start Taylor, who could share with Vaughn, who could share with Abanikanda, who could share with Juszczyk. We don't know exactly how this is all going to play out for San Francisco on a short week in a must-win game for them. Do they trust Patrick Taylor to get, those 15+ touches? Whereas Thielen has been an absolute stud the last 2 weeks and now is facing Dallas. So, I'm in a spot where it's a 10-team league, and I just looked at the waiver wire just at a glance last night. and I need a defense. The Ravens are sitting there, but I know that the guy that I'm playing is going to probably pick up Thielen and start him against me. And I'm like, do I want to go to the Commanders, who I love their matchup this week because of the situation for New Orleans?
Yeah, you will.
And pass on the Ravens, which could easily be the best defense this week because they're playing the Giants. Like it's a tough call. So do you give your opponent?
It's tough call.
I think if you go Thielen for sure.
I think you go Thielen because the drop off from the Ravens.
But again, that's the thing. Are you worried about your team more, or are you worried about somebody else's team more? When you're trying to factor these into the equation. So that also is something that comes into play. But in any event, I do think in terms of the best player overall for this week, Dave made a great point about Taylor if he's the starting running back for 49ers. I just think for me, Thielen has the most upside across the board.
Okay. Yeah, and it's a good point. And make sure you check your opponent's lineup and see what your opponent needs. And don't be afraid to play a little bit of defense against your opponent if you can. Now, got to talk about FAB real quick because we brought it up briefly last week. Again, I said I wish I had said it more on Tuesday. People spent way too much FAB on Isaac Guerendo because you didn't have to. You have to look at the other people in your league and how much FAB they have. I don't know if Thielen is going to get the Guerendo treatment. And yeah, I think it's reasonable to spend most of your FAB on Thielen at this point. But here's my point. If you have $50 in FAB left and the next highest in your league of the remaining teams has 30, spend 31 on Thielen. Don't spend 50. I saw it over and over again with Guerendo. People spending 100% of their FAB on Isaac Guerendo when the second highest bid was not even close to that because nobody had that much FAB. So just make sure you're checking. It's, you can do it if you go to it. It's the best way to do it on CBS.
If you go on the free agent page.
Oh, go to my team. If you go to my team,
there are two ways to do it. But if you're looking at the free agent page, there's in the top right corner, you could see the waiver budgets.
Right. Yeah. It shows how much you have left, and then you click that, and you can see everybody. It takes 15 seconds.
Yeah, and I do wonder, Adam, just in the scenarios you're bringing up, which you're again 100% right in how people should approach it. I wonder if some of those 100% bids were people that just needed to win and get in and weren't worrying about past this. They should have.
Well, it doesn't matter. Yeah,
right. Guerendo was worth the big bid. Like if you
totally but
Adam, the playoffs, it was worth it.
Yeah, but Adam's point is don't spend more than you have to.
Right.
Don't spend more than you have to. Exactly. But I think
life advice too.
Do you think Thielen is in that category of spend pretty much everything on him?
I mean, you look what he's done the last two games. You look at the way that this team is operating right now and the matchup that they have. You get to I just want to make sure I have it right. They get Arizona next week, right?
Yeah.
Week 16.
Dallas, Arizona, Tampa.
Right. So 2 of the 3 games, you already saw him beat up on Tampa. And this matchup is certainly not one to fear against Dallas. And so if he's still going to get 8+ targets with the way Bryce Young is throwing the ball right now, he's top 24 receiver. Go back to the conversation we had Sunday. I'm starting him over Metcalf. I'm starting him over Deebo Samuel. That's easy. Malik Neighbors. I would much rather start Adam Thielen right now. So that's just where we are.
It's crazy, but it's also true. And then I was about to say, well, wait a minute. Could the Panthers run their way to victory over the Cowboys? Maybe not have Bryce Young throw as much as normal. And then I think about the Panthers defense and I go, nah, they're probably going to have to throw a decent amount.
Yeah, he only threw 34 times against the team that's been the best defense.
34 is good.
And Adam Thielen against a team that was destroying wide receivers had 102 yards and 9 catches. It's 2 straight games with 99 or more yards, 10 to 11 targets. And 19 or more PPR fantasy points for Adam Thielen. All right, and the Cowboys defense has been playing a lot better, but losing Overshown, it hurts. That guy's been playing great, and he had the knee injury yesterday. You guys watched The Simpsons yesterday?
No, I did catch some of it. Yes,
it was cute.
Yes.
Cute. All right, there are some waiver wire quarterbacks with great matchups this week, like Will Levis against the Bengals. Aaron Rodgers.
If Levis is going to play.
Yeah, well, they seem optimistic he's going to play, but Levis has the Bengals if he plays. Cooper Rush at Carolina, Aaron Rodgers at Jacksonville, Kirk Cousins at Las Vegas, and whichever Raiders quarterback gets to face Atlanta. I wish those guys were a little bit more appealing. And then there's Anthony Richardson against Denver. Don't think they're going to have Riley Moss, but I'm not sure yet. Their number 2 cornerback. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But listen, the holiday season is here. This is a true story. We are holiday shopping right now. We're online looking for a whole bunch of things. I said to my wife, I said, hey, listen, go to shop.cbssports.com/fantasy. I didn't say it in such a, advertisement way.
How did you say it?
I don't talk like this when I'm off the air. But go to shop.cbsports.com/fantasy. There's actually some really cool stuff on there. There's this little Pac-Man machine that I've really got my eye on. But it's okay. This is the Fantasy Football Today new fan shop powered by ShopSense. Shop.cbsports.com/fantasy. I'll put a link in the episode description. You can scan the QR code if we're able to do that. I know we're having some issues with our video today. But this is where you go if you want the ultimate gift for the fantasy football manager out there. There's league prizes. I think there's like an I suck at fantasy football shirt, that kind of stuff. Or there's also stuff if you want to upgrade your fan cave, if you're just a big fan. Sports memorabilia, game day decor, perfect for the holiday season. Visit the shop now at shop.cbsports.com/fantasy. We're going to take a break here on Fantasy Football Today. News and notes and much more waiver wire when we come back.
Welcome to JJ's.
I'll have wait, there's no way I can get a burger?
No chance, but you can have the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount Plus. Oh, hang on. There's a toy.
All right, we're back here. And here are your news and notes. And there's a lot. Derek Carr out for officially out for the season, or just
No.
Okay, but out for a while.
Well, there's some differing reports. He is considered week to week. They are not planning to put him on IR, and I believe Darren Rizzi said they're even not ruling him out for the game against the Commanders yet. So I would be shocked if he played. I mean, they have nothing to play for. Why are they going to risk him going out there with a broken hand? So At this point, we just don't know who the backup or who the starter is going to be, because it could be Haener or it could be Spencer Rattler.
All right, so Derek Carr with the hand injury. Aiden O'Connell, I thought that he was going to have a season-ending injury. He might play this week. He has a bone bruise in his knee. That is excellent news. I mean, forget about fantasy. Happy to see that's not a serious injury for O'Connell. Drew Lock is going to be the starter if healthy, but he had an MRI yesterday. Giants quarterback Drew Lock. The Falcons sticking with Kirk Cousins. The Browns sticking with Jameis Winston for Week 15. And according to Jay Glazer, Aaron Rodgers has been playing through a hamstring tear, a sprained MCL, and a high ankle sprain. So that is something. Running back news.
That explains a lot.
Yeah. Breece Hall has a chance to play this week. He has not been ruled out. Isaac Orendo was listed as a DNP on the estimated practice report on Monday. They play the Rams on Thursday. Ken Walker will undergo testing on his calf. No update yet on his status. Jonathan Brooks retore his right ACL.
Such a shame.
Yeah. We have time to talk about this in later weeks, obviously, but right now, if you're drafting for 2025, Chuba Hubbard is a round blank pick.
Haven't thought about it at all.
5. Wow. I mean, he's played well enough to be ahead of that, but all right.
Offensive line is going to be really good again, and you hope that the passing game just continues to improve. So,
where did you say what round?
5 at the latest, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking 3 or 4, but I don't know that I'd take him, but I feel like that's where his ADP would be.
I wouldn't take him that early, but I think, once we get past the stud running backs and then that, group of receivers that's going to come off the board, then he's probably next. He'll be a top 20 running back.
Bucky Irving's got this back injury, so we're just going to have to monitor that. Wide receiver news. We got Demarcus Robinson with an AC sprain and a Thursday game at San Francisco. Romeo Doubs and Cedric Tillman still in the concussion protocol. They've got time to clear it, but they've missed 2 games. I believe both of them missed 2 games, 2 games. I don't remember. George Pickens may not play this week. So he's got a hamstring injury, and that's one that if you have Pickens, you should be making alternate plans. Tight end news. Will Dissly's out a couple of weeks with a shoulder injury, and Tyler Higbee could play this week, Thursday at San Francisco. No practice for Trent Williams. Kansas City lost offensive tackle DJ Humphries. The Giants are going to be without at least 1 interior offensive lineman, if not 2, against arguably the best run defense in football. The Ravens, who are also getting healthier on their defensive line. So Tyrone Tracy is going to be a tough one this week. Teron Armstead doesn't seem great for him this week. That's the Dolphins left tackle. Dallas center Cooper Beebe left with a concussion. Jets right tackle Morgan Moses has an injury. And the big injury news, Sauce Gardner could play this big on defense. Sauce Gardner could play this week at Jacksonville. I get mentioned Baltimore getting healthier up front. Nick Bosa,
Pierce coming back?
Pierce and Travis Jones. They practiced in full. Cleveland cornerback Greg Newsome is going to miss time with a hamstring injury. Their pass defense has been horrible with him. I mentioned DeMarvion Overshone for the Cowboys with the knee injury. Let's hope that's not too serious. Look bad. And we'll move on. Top 3 players at each position. Jamie, we haven't talked much about the quarterbacks yet. Who are the top 3 quarterbacks to get?
Richardson's right at the threshold of players that we talk about, 65%. So if he's out there, I think he's still worth starting against the Broncos. You mentioned some of the injuries that they were dealing with in week 13. We'll see who's healthy, but really it's not much about him throwing. It's about what he'll do as a, dual threat. And he's been running a little bit more lately, if not a lot more by comparison to whatever you've been, viewing him. At least 6.1 fantasy points with his legs in 3 outings in a row. So that gives him a nice floor if he's going to continue to do that with 3 rushing touchdowns over that span. Jameis Winston still going to be the starter for the Browns. Kevin Stefanski confirmed that on Monday. So a little bit better matchup for him this week, taking on the Chiefs. As we know, prior to last week, they've been struggling a little bit against opposing quarterbacks. So Winston's still in the starting range, not a top 12 guy, but certainly a top 15-ish quarterback. And same thing with Aaron Rodgers. He's third for me. 18 fantasy points or more in 3 games in a row, 5 of his last 6. Great matchup against the Jaguars. I think he'll do better than Will Levis did. So with the way his receivers played last week, hopefully they stay in bounds on a few more plays. But Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams should hopefully help Rodgers get to that 18-plus point range. There's not outside of really Richardson and potentially Winston, there's not a guy that I think has 22 to 25 point potential. Rodgers really hasn't done that consistently. Bryce Young is after Rodgers for me. So there's just, not a lot of certainty there, but like you said, some guys have some great matchups.
Richardson against the Broncos, top 12 guy?
Yep.
Dave?
Not for me.
Okay. Would you start Caleb Williams this week against Minnesota or Anthony Richardson?
Richardson.
Wow. Okay. Would you start Matthew Stafford against the Niners on Thursday or Richardson?
Richardson.
When my rankings come out, Stafford will be ahead of Richardson.
How about Brock Purdy?
Purdy will also be ahead of Richardson.
All right, let's go to the running backs. Dave, who are the top 3 running backs to get? Patrick Taylor and?
So I've got Taylor 1. I've got McCormick 2. I've got Isaiah Davis 3. Jamie talked about all 3 of these guys at the very start of the show. I don't know if I've really got a whole lot to add. I feel safer about McCormick playing rest of season than I do Davis. I just like how Davis has been involved for the Jets, and last week he was the better running back. We talked about it on Sunday's show. But those are the top 3. But there's other running backs that we'll get to later on that I think deserve some honorable mentions and are worth picking up.
Yeah, you can mention them now. Just who knows how long people will tune in,
You got the Chargers running backs, and Vidal ended up playing more than Gus Edwards last week. It might have been because they were chasing points. To me, that's meaningful. So Vidal, 68% available. You could stash him. Jeremy McNichols is a stash. Jaleel McLaughlin might be the best one to stash. We saw him lead the way for Denver the last time we saw them play. He could end up being the lead running back for them again against Indianapolis. When I think about that Colts defense, I think about how stout they are in the middle of the line and how weak they are on the edges. And that's where McLaughlin has been able to win, is running on the edges, using his speed. And I wonder if he could be like a desperation RB play in week 15, but also someone that could evolve into a starting caliber fantasy running back in week 16, week 17, if he gets the opportunity in week 15. He's a stash, but somebody that is absolutely worth throwing on the bench just to see what happens in Denver.
So quick follow-up for both of you guys here. If Alexander Mattison and or Zamir White play this week, do you think that affects, how much do you think that affects Sincere McCormick? Because he had almost every running back carry last week against Tampa Bay.
I don't know if White does at this point. I think Madison still matters just because he was so involved and really the lead guy for the majority of the season. It feels like there's a lot of, Spider-Man meme between what White and McCormick will do. Whereas Madison could still be a dual threat, more so I think than McCormick would be. Amir Abdullah is probably not worth rostering at this point, after he just had 2 total touches against Tampa Bay and they used McCormick in the passing game. But really, it's just a bad environment, unfortunately, with the quarterback situation being what it is. Not that Aiden O'Connell was the savior of the Raiders, but, now they're on their 3rd string guy, and Desmond Ridder has clearly been struggling. Plus, the Falcons' run defense has actually been good, so if you're just looking at a 1-week situation, that's why I think it's, you can make a case that if Breece Hall is out, Isaiah Davis makes more sense than Sincere McCormick. Just even in a shared situation, whereas McCormick would be the lead guy. It's hard to overlook McCormick getting 15 plus touches because I think that would be the case again. And the only thing I think that is somewhat positive for McCormick is the Raiders can still play with a lead in this game. I mean, the Falcons have been that bad offensively that despite what should be a favorable matchup, they are at home. They could still, handle their business and play well defensively and keep this a close game where McCormick can be extremely involved. So that's why I give McCormick a slight edge over Davis, but Davis' matchup is better. I think his situation's better, just in terms of even sharing with Braylon Allen, and the only problem is that you have Breece Hall's potential return looming, and then it could just be messy for all these guys.
I am a diehard Raiders fan, by the way, for the rest of the season. Come on, baby. Let's go. All right, Jamie, top 3 wide receivers.
The top 3 wide receivers, there's one and then a big drop off. So it's Adam Thielen for me. And then right now I have Romeo Doubs too, but Josh Palmer, if you tell me right now, I probably should put Palmer too. If you tell me Ladd McConkey's out, then Palmer's probably going to be a borderline starter. Great match. Yeah, I'm going to make that switch now. So Palmer's 2. And then the Packers guys 3. I have Dobbs and Dontavian Wicks, grouped together just because Wicks, 4 catches, looked decent last week against the Lions, and I think he'll still be involved if Dobbs is out. But I mean, Palmer, should have had a big touchdown against the Chiefs. Targets were there for him, and he does, things that are a little bit safer, I think, for the Chargers than Quentin Johnston does. So Thielen 1, Palmer 2, Dobbs 3. If you want to put Cedric Tillman ahead of Dobbs, with the opportunity of what he can be when he comes back, I certainly have no problem with that.
Okay, and if Josh Downs or Michael Pittman or who was the other one? I'm sorry. Quentin Johnston. If they were available, how would they rank with Palmer? I know they'd be behind Thielen, but how would the Colts wide receivers or Quentin Johnston rank with Josh Palmer?
I mean, I would take Johnson over Palmer, so that's an easy one. And I think if you're talking about the Colts guys, yes, Josh Downs for sure. I mean, if he's available and he's healthy, he's a borderline must-start guy, especially if the Broncos secondary is still beat up. And Pittman's not far behind. You just wonder, did the Broncos learn their lesson and just going to say, okay, Surtain is now following the number 1 guy no matter where he goes because Jerry Jeudy just had.
He won't do it to Downs. There's
not Downs,
no,
but I mean
but
Pittman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can say goodbye to Pittman having a big game if that happens.
Yeah.
I don't think he'd do that with Pittman though, personally. But anyway, let's hope Josh Downs plays. We don't know his status. Last I heard, Red was not super optimistic, but I'd pick him up if he were available. Dave, tight ends, top 3.
Yeah, it's gross at tight end. Hunter Henry, 39% available. Cross your fingers that he's still out there. You can double cross your other fingers for Pat Freiermuth, but he's only 21% available. If they're already taken, then you're looking at, hold your nose, Juwan Johnson without Derek Carr at quarterback, Cole Kmet with Caleb Williams at quarterback, Dalton Schultz, these guys are all kind of for me. Grant Calcaterra's on the list, but again, you're hoping for him to score another touchdown like he did last week. Disley's going to be out for a while, so maybe there's something there with Stone Smart. He is so smart. Smartt is how you spell the name. And then there's just a bunch of other guys that they have opportunities. You're hoping for 8 PPR points from Austin Hooper, Dan Bellinger. Maybe Isaiah Likely saves you. That's about it.
Not really feeling it with Jake Ferguson at Carolina and then Tampa Bay.
What's the roster percentage for Ferguson?
58.
Yeah, if he's out there, I would put him ahead of the list of guys that I took a deep breath and before I said their names.
Okay, so it'd be,
he'd be ahead of Juwan, Kmet, Schultz, Smart.
I think you should have said SMRTT for the joke, but maybe I'm nitpicking, but I appreciate the Simpsons joke. DSTs, Jamie, we got some good ones this week, huh?
First off, check the Ravens. They were 66% rostered, so just outside the threshold that we talk about. So if they are out there, they are number 1, taking on the Giants with the beat up offensive line and most likely to beat up Drew Lock. Commanders would be the first of the group that we typically talk about. Cowboys would be second. Falcons would be third. Gross as that sounds. Packers would be 4th, and the Jets would be 5th. If you're looking ahead and you're trying to get Week 16 DSTs for anybody that's listening to us or watching us that's on a bye, the Rams get the Jets in Week 16. The Falcons get the Giants in Week 16. The Packers get the Saints without Derek Carr in week 16. And the Raiders get the Jaguars in week 16 as well.
All right. So you said Baltimore and Washington would be the top choices. Baltimore at the Giants, Washington at New Orleans. And also you've got the Cowboys at Carolina, Falcons at Las Vegas, Packers at Seattle, and the Jets at Jacksonville. And the Packers next week have New Orleans, as you mentioned. So the Packers could be a 2-week option for you. And yeah, actually, I was going to talk about, sorry, give me your list of kickers before we do that.
The kickers will be go back to Will Reichert. Hopefully he doesn't miss a kick this time. Matthew Wright, if he continues to have the job, this could be a similar situation what we talked about with John Parker Romo last week, where he lost his job because the starter came back. So Harrison Butker is eligible to return. So check out that. Justin Tucker, if you want to go back to him, hopefully he's more accurate following their bye week. Will Lutz against the Colts and Jake Moody against the Rams.
So if you are not playing in week 15 and you just need some week 16 advice, here are some players that you could add. So 2 quarterbacks on the waiver wire list this week have good matchups next week. Anthony Richardson gets Tennessee and Jameis Winston is at Cincinnati. So the top 2 quarterbacks that you heard Jamie talk about in terms of, widely available or close to widely available, Richardson and Winston. Richardson gets Tennessee, Winston's at Cincinnati. So that's great. I know a lot of people have been asking about dropping Kyler Murray. He is at Carolina next week. I feel like
New England this week.
Yeah, I feel like right, and New England stinks. I feel like Carolina's playing a little bit better on defense, not just basing that just off Jalen Hurts, but recently we've started some kind of lousy, or we've thought about starting some lousy quarterbacks against them, and they've, like Daniel.
Baker Mayfield was my start of the week, and he's
Baker Mayfield, yeah, exactly. So maybe they're just getting better. But Kyler Murray does have Carolina next week. Caleb Williams has Detroit. Aiden O'Connell, if he's back, gets Jacksonville. Sincere McCormick gets Jacksonville. Dalton Schultz is at Kansas City. Dalton Schultz, I feel like, has some pretty good matchups coming up.
Miami.
Right. Miami this week, at Kansas City next week. That's amazing. Jake Ferguson, good matchup this week against Carolina, and then Tampa Bay next week. And then Jamie mentioned some DSTs. See if I have the same list as you. I have Arizona, the Rams, the
Arizona's two rostered.
2 rostered. Okay.
Yeah.
Then the Rams, Falcons, and Packers, I think, were the teams I had. So
could you imagine the Falcons being league winners? How bad that defense was. They're getting after the quarterback the last 3 games, so it's last 2 games, excuse me, because they were on a bye 3 weeks ago. Last 2 games, they're getting after quarterback. They got after Justin Herbert. They did a great job this week at harassing Sam Darnold. And so it's potential given the matchups. You are talking about Raiders on, 3rd string quarterback with Desmond Ridder, and then getting the Saints without, getting Giants.
Yeah,
we know that's been, as good as it can get. So
if you can get the Ravens DST, maybe make the effort to get the Falcons DST as well, and then you've got both matchups against the Giants the next 2 weeks. Then you drop the Ravens after this week. You pick up the Colts. That's who they get in week 6 or 17. Just have 3 DSTs lined up against the Giants to end your year.
They're the worst. They are the worst. It is weird to root for the worst team in football. That's usually the Jets. Usually we have the Jets to look down on. This is really bad. All right. Shallow leagues and deep leagues. We'll do this first. And then we'll talk about Monday Night Football and some more names on the waiver wire and who to drop. But Jamie, who are the shallow league guys we need to know about?
So there's 2 quarterbacks. You mentioned Caleb Williams. He did do very well against the Vikings the first time around. He's so tough to trust because he's just not playing very well. But 3 straight games with 18 plus fantasy points, 2 of those over 30 fantasy points. One of those was against the Vikings. And then, as you mentioned, against Detroit the week after that. So Williams not awful, but Matthew Stafford has been awesome. And I think he's still going to be good enough against the 49ers while their defense is maybe getting healthy. He only had 14 fantasy points against them in the first matchup. That was the first game he played officially without both of his receivers, without Kupp and with Puka Nacua, because Kupp was hurt in week 2. So those are the 2 shallow league quarterbacks. You want all the shallow leagues?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Running backs would be Jalen Warren. Just continues to give you good low end numbers and could be a superstar if there is no Najee Harris. Braylon Allen, just based on what we saw last week, and if Breece Hall is out, and Tank Bigsby. They won the game against the Titans. They have 3 competitive games coming up remaining on their schedule. And so hopefully he still continues to get 15 plus touches, had 18 carries against the Titans, which we know is not an easy matchup, and came through with a score. So Remaining schedule, starting with the Jets, is a favorable one for him.
Yeah, quick pause here. Bigsby or just to get it out there, Bigsby or Patrick Taylor?
I would probably go Bigsby with the news that we have now, knowing that matchup is relatively similar for both, and you know that Bigsby is going to be locked into his role rest of season.
Okay, Dave, Bigsby or Patrick Taylor?
I'd take Taylor, and it's first of all, if you're in a league this shallow and they're both out there, then maybe Bigsby won't even get picked up even after he scored a touchdown.
He's only 64% rostered. That's what I have him at, Jamie. What do you have him at?
No, so that changed the middle of the night. It was 64 when I first started doing it, and I had him in the list of guys to pick up, and then it changed to 70 unless it changed back.
I got it. It's at 64. So I think he's got to be in your column. Sorry, man. Sorry.
Let's see what he's at right now.
Yeah, 64. I'm on his player page. 64%. Jamie likes to go with the guys who are who are rostered in 65% or fewer.
Because I originally had it there, and then I moved him to the other area. Whatever. I'm not changing it. He's in the column.
Okay. All right. Who are the shallow league wide receivers? I talked about the Colts guys and Quentin Johnston.
Hold on. So wait a minute. If Bigsby is available, you'd put him ahead of all the running backs that we've talked about.
I would.
Taylor, yes. McCormick, Davis.
Yep.
Okay.
The wide receivers would be Quinn Johnston, both Colts guys. Romo Dunze. I wonder what Chris Olave decides to do now if he is able to clear the concussion protocol and play simply because of the quarterback situation. But if he's out there, he's worth adding. And Keon Coleman as well. We know he's on the verge of returning. So playing with the MVP is not a bad situation to be. The tight ends. What?
I thought, was that a knock at me?
No. Josh Allen's the MVP. That's not knock you. The tight ends would be Pat Freiermuth, Zach Ertz, and Tucker Kraft. I like Ertz the best.
I'm not going to get into this now. You don't want to hear my opinion about Joe Burrow and his MVP candidacy. It would be.
Oh, if they were in contention, he'd be right there.
Yeah, well, he doesn't play defense for them. It's not his fault that their defense is horrible.
You know what's interesting is I watched the first episode of Hard Knocks last night, and it was the Steelers that they were reviewing the Browns-Steelers game, and coming off that game, Myles Garrett was getting a lot of Defensive Player of the Year hype. It's a very similar argument to yours. They're not close to the playoffs, and
Myles Garrett, man,
he's having a fantastic season.
Well, yeah, I just want to say I've been watching a lot more tape this year. It's been really fun and really helpful, and I watched him one game against Andrew Thomas, and just the way he played, it made me realize. I always obviously knew he was one of the best players of football. He's generational. He is so good. First ballot Hall, like unbelievable that we're living in his era, and his teams have been so bad that he's probably going to be a little underappreciated. Myles Garrett, it's kind of a shame. All right, so yeah. Oh, Dave, Tank Bigsby, what? Josh Downs? None of these guys are available at my league. Wasting my time. Give me the deep league guys.
I'll start with the DST. The Falcons are the deep league DST get. They're 83% available, but I mean, honestly, there's probably going to be 3 or 4 other DSTs that you'll be able to find. All right, quarterback. Almost the same thing as I said with the DSTs. One of Richardson, Winston, Rodgers, Levis, they'll be out there, but if they're not, then I guess it's Bryce Young, who's 85% available. I would certainly take him ahead of Mac Jones and Jake Hayner and Drew Lock and all these other guys. I think it could be an interesting stash if you've got really deep rosters to get Michael Penix, who's 92% available. I imagine that the majority of the leagues where he's already rostered, those are keeper leagues. They're thinking long-term with him. But I feel like there's a chance he plays eventually, and he could be really, really good. Should put up a lot of numbers. Patrick Taylor's 96% available. He's going to be the top running back. Isaiah Davis is 94% available. I don't think you're going to care much about the other running backs outside of them being stash candidates. Kendre Miller, 90% available, big-time stash candidate. Izzy Abanikanda, 91% available, a stash candidate. And then there's other running backs that are like handcuffs, like Sean Tucker and Jalen Wright. You kind of know the names already, but those are the deep league guys. Josh Palmer, Jamie brought him up. I think it's a great point. He was basically in the Ladd McConkey role against Kansas City, 73% available. Jalen McMillan had a big game against the Raiders. He's 79% available. Might be worth just throwing him on the bench and seeing how he does. I'm going to say this name again, Adam. This is an IR stash. He is still 85% available. It's Marquise Hollywood Brown of the Kansas City Chiefs. There's a chance he could come back in the regular season. That's a guy that I would want to have sitting on my IR in case he comes back. And then the deep league tight ends, it's basically the same list of guys that you want to hold your nose on. Stone Smart, Jawan Johnson, Austin Hooper, Dan Bellinger. Probably put Grant Calcaterra toward the top of that list as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I got one more thing to say.
Okay.
Bengals aren't eliminated from playoff contention, right?
I don't know. Probably not.
They are not. And so if they win out and the Chargers or Broncos stumble, Burrow leads them into the playoffs. Does that improve his MVP candidacy?
Of course. He should be an MVP candidate. He is having an amazing year. On the broadcast, they said that Burrow said he's having his best year and it's not even close. And he's been so damn good. And I don't know. I mean,
what I'm worried about is one more loss.
Yeah, I know,
or once they're eliminated, Burrow shuts it down. He said he hurt his knee after the game on Monday. So
he also talked about
Joe Burrow as your stud quarterback. Keep riding with him, but you better have a backup ready to go.
He also talked about wanting to get the Triple Crown for Jamar Chase. So I wonder how much that keeps him playing.
Oh, that's interesting. All right. That is it for the shallow leagues and the deep leagues. I meant to bring this up. Sorry. I don't know that there've been some weeks where there've been the shallow league guy that is so clearly ahead of everyone else, like Keenan Allen or something like that. But Jamie, is there that guy this week that, whoa, he might be out there? I was actually thinking about Tank Dell. I think he's 86% rostered. I've sort of lost faith in him, but he might be better than anyone but Thielen. I don't know. But is there that shallow league guy that is so much better than everyone else that if he's available, you are getting him?
I don't know. I got to go back and check all the percentages now to see what's right and what's not. But Christian Watson would be one, just based on the game that he just had and clearly the matchups coming up for them. And I think just getting more chances to make plays downfield would probably be my favorite. Quentin Johnston, clearly,
if there's he's 63% roster.
Yep, that's what he was when I first started doing this. So I got to go back and do it again. So him and Quentin Johnston, Johnston's certainly a big priority. So Christian Watson would be the second receiver to add for me after Adam Thielen.
All right, that's kind of a headline here. So I'm just going to repeat that. Christian Watson after Adam Thielen is the number 2 receiver to get. He is 63% rostered. Sorry that we did not talk about him earlier in the show, but he's coming off 4 catches for 114 yards on 7 targets at Detroit. He's not foolproof. That's he's had 2 huge games recently. He's had some duds. And if they get Dobbs back, it could hurt his targets. I mean, he's been mostly in the 3 or 4 target range, and he had 7 last week without Romeo Dobbs. So he's not like a slam dunk, but he's doing some good things, some encouraging things right now, Christian Watson. We'll come back, talk about last night's game and more, who to drop, etc. after this.
Historic rivals with unforgettable seasons meet in a game of honor. The Army-Navy game presented by USAA, December 14th on CBS.
Welcome back. All right. I'm going to go on a real quick football rant. Not even rant. Here's the thing that bugs me, and it really bugged me watching the game yesterday. These coaches that stick with veteran running backs too long. We should have had more Rico Dowdle early in the season. That is so obvious. From week 1, we should have had more Chase Brown. No respect to Zach Moss. I was wrong about that one from fantasy perspective, but it's so obvious Chase Brown is so much better than Zach Moss. Tyrone Tracy is another one that sticks out to me. I'm just so sick of these great, talented running backs being stuck behind players and needing injuries to finally break loose. And it was so clear last night watching those 2 running backs, Rico Dowdle and Chase Brown, who had nice games. Dave, any fantasy takeaways from the Cowboys and the Bengals?
I think you nailed it with Rico Dowdle. I thought he looked fantastic. He's looked great for several weeks now. And I bet Mike McCarthy, if you bought him a shot of whiskey and asked him to be honest, he'd probably tell you, yeah, I wish I had started Dowdle a lot sooner. And I think he's a must-start number 2 fantasy running back moving forward. There's no reason to have Zeke in there ahead of him. I hope Lamb's okay. He was off to this great start in the game. He had 4 catches, 71 yards, and a touchdown. in the first quarter, and then he landed on his shoulder. He was slow to get up, finished the game, but finished with 693 and 1. Only 3 targets the other 3 quarters. That's something that makes me a little bit nervous about Lamb moving forward, but as long as he's out there, you've got to continue to start him. And Cooper Rush is doing a good job of getting him involved. I wish he had done a better job of getting more throws to Jake Ferguson. 6 targets is okay, but the results aren't good. That's really it from the Dallas side. I don't see myself gravitating toward Cooks. If you've been carrying Jalen Tolbert, you can let him go. And then
What about
Cincinnati,
T.
you know who you're starting in Cincinnati.
What about Higgins? Do you make anything of this horrible game from T. Higgins?
No, I think you just chalk it up to maybe this is a sign of what Jamie was talking about, where Joe Burrow wants Jamar Chase to get the Triple Crown. And so now it's going to be, double-digit targets minimum for Jamar Chase every week, and T. Higgins will have to fight a little bit more to come through on his other targets. But again, there's not going to be anything bigger for the Bengals than winning. And so whatever it takes for them to win the game, Joe Burrow is going to have them do. It was just a little strange that it was just so lopsided in this game. But I would imagine next week we could see T. Higgins bounce back, and I'm still going to start him.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, I'm glad L'Jarius Sneed is not playing this week, so I can start Jamar Chase in the fantasy playoffs. All right. That's it for that game. I only have a few names on the drop-o-meter, but we can talk about players to drop as we get to each position. TJ Hawkinson, 0 to 10 on the drop-o-meter with the Bears this week.
I think he's fairly droppable. Let's put him at a 5. Someone who's just not getting crazy target volume week in and week out. When he does get targets, what he does with the ball, he's just okay. And we're seeing Jordan Addison really evolve here. And man, that offense is going to be a tough out in the playoffs. And so if Addison's going to continue seeing a lot of targets and being explosive, what's the reason to get TJ Hawkinson involved?
Nick Westbrook-Akine, 86% rostered, but he gets the Bengals this week after a bad game against Jacksonville. 0 to 10 on Nick Westbrook-Akine.
2. I think also he may get Mason Rudolph. Take that into account.
Yeah. Would you drop him you'd obviously drop him for Thielen.
Yes.
Thielen for Watson and potentially Palmer if McConkey's out.
Okay.
Right. He's like a 6 for me on the drop-o-meter. I don't want to necessarily drop him, but he's exactly the type of player that you drop as you get your roster ready for the fantasy playoffs. Like if it's coming down to Nick Westbrook-Akine as a bench receiver, definitely not going to start him, or getting the defense that I want for week 16, I'm taking the defense.
And Kyler Murray, just because I have gotten a lot of questions about him and whether or not he's worth keeping. Kyler Murray, New England at Carolina at the Rams.
0.
He's a must-start quarterback for me this week.
Okay. So to the quarterbacks then. Stafford is above Richardson, right? You said?
I would start Richardson over Stafford.
Oh, sorry. Dave said Stafford. James.
I would say, yeah. For now, I have Stafford there.
All right. Look, Denver is 8th best against quarterbacks. Here are the start-worthy quarterbacks, I would call them, against Denver this year. Geno Smith, all the way back to week 1. Geno Smith, about 20 points. Baker Mayfield, 10. Justin Herbert wasn't so start-worthy at that point in the year, 15. Lamar Jackson, 29, without a lot of rushing. Patrick Mahomes, 17. Missed Kelsey wide open in the end zone, could have had 24. Jameis Winston, 40 points. They might be a little bit overrated, and of course, a little bit. They're great, but they might be a little overrated. But of course, without Riley Moss last week, they were horrible. And as of now, I don't expect him back, but that's not based on much.
Well, I mean, it's almost like an equal loss if Josh Downs isn't there, because that takes away the upside of the passing game for Richardson. He had so many drops in that Patriots game. It was disgusting. And hopefully his receiving core can help him out a little bit. The thing that makes him attractive is that he's going to hopefully run. And if you're getting those 6 points, then I think that gives him the opportunity to get to that 20-point range, because that's without necessarily scoring touchdowns that he's done that. At least last or 2 games ago, 61 yards rushing. I think the thing that's encouraging is that you mentioned it, that we've seen some quarterbacks have success. We've seen him play so much better since he's come back from being benched. They're coming off a bye week. And the fascinating thing, this, I don't want to spoil it for you, but this might be the game of the week. This is the 2 teams fighting for right now the final wild card spot in the AFC. Colts can still get in if they knock the Broncos out, or if the Chargers slip up by any stretch. But this is a huge game for both these teams. And so Richardson's going to have to do probably a lot of heavy lifting, and I think he'll deliver.
Jameis Winston, does he bounce back? So the Chiefs, 4 of the last 6 quarterbacks to face the Chiefs have scored 20 to 25 fantasy points in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. And they just lost another cornerback, the guy who was filling in for
Josh Williams.
Yeah, for their number 2 quarterback who was hurt several weeks ago. They just haven't been that good since Jalen Watson left in week 7. So
no, they're signing Steven Nelson.
I like Jameis this week, guys. Do you like him?
I do too. I think it's the same thing as always with him. It's a volume play. You're hoping that he throws the ball 40 times and falls into production that overcomes whatever turnovers that he has against Kansas City. They're not going to be able to run against Kansas City. They really haven't been able to run against anybody.
All right, so the Jameis is an option. Jameis or Stafford?
Stafford's ahead of Jameis again for now in my rankings.
Stafford for me.
All right, Jameis or Caleb?
Jameis.
Jameis.
Would you start anyone else over Caleb Williams? Aaron Rodgers against the Jaguars, Cooper Rush, Carolina, Drake May, Bryce Young.
Rodgers is close, but I would start Williams. No, so Williams out of those guys.
I currently have Rodgers and Williams back-to-back. Rodgers 1 spot ahead. All the other guys you said are behind Caleb Williams.
Yeah, Cooper Rush has been all right. He scored about 18 points last night. He's been in that range, since becoming a starter, except for that horrible game against Philadelphia. I think that was when Dak got hurt. So he's been fine. Bryce Young coming off he wasn't that bad. Like if Liga catches that pass, it's a great game it's a 20-point game for Bryce Young, coming off a 25.6 game fantasy point game against Tampa Bay, and he's got Dallas, and they just lost Overshown for the season.
Yeah, he's not bad. He's a starter in Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues. I don't know how many people in 1 quarterback leagues are starting Bryce Young in the playoffs, but if you are desperate, it's not horrible. And then again, if you're looking at what his upcoming schedule is, get past the Arizona game, he gets Tampa Bay again. He just scored 25 fantasy points against the Bucs, and they just lost Antoine Winfield.
So if Aiden O'Connell and Will Levis play this week, will they crack your top 20? Levis against Cincinnati, O'Connell against Atlanta.
Probably not, because there's a lot of good quarterback matchups this week, and I'm concerned. Levis would have if he was healthy coming off of a good game against Jacksonville. I was actually excited about his upcoming schedule. He pooped the bed against the Jaguars. I don't know how much of that was the shoulder injury at halftime, and then he just couldn't throw the ball in the second half. But the schedule's fantastic. It's the Bengals have been fantastic. Cooper Rush didn't take advantage of it, but I hope that Will Levis can, or Mason Rudolph can. And look, and again, this is more super flex or 2 quarterback leagues. Mason Rudolph, his last 2 starts was 21 fantasy points. And now you're talking about that against the Bengals. It's not awful. So super flex 2 QB leagues, he should be added and potentially started.
Just off the top of my head, as I recall, Mason Rudolph was pretty good for Calvin Ridley. He was good, like lower ADOT, good, high percentage targets, that kind of stuff. So obviously we'll talk about that throughout the week. Let's go to the running backs here. You can see if Jalen Warren or Braylon Allen or Tank Bigsby are available.
Yeah, I switched it. Bigsby's now number 1.
All right. Dave likes Taylor better than Bigsby. Jamie likes Bigsby ahead of Taylor, but they're 1 and 2. That's interesting. And none of that is any of that the thought of Garendo possibly playing, or is
that's 100% the thought of Garendo, not necessarily playing for this. So for this week, if you're just talking 1 week, you can make a case for Taylor over Bigsby. The more I think about it, I probably would rank Bigsby higher, just because the matchup against the Jets has been, I think, somewhat favorable. When they decide to tackle, they're decent. When they don't decide to tackle, which is more often than not, then the opportunity is there for the opposing running backs. And he's been good in competitive games, and I think this will be a competitive game. We don't know when Garendo is going to return. So it might just be a 1-week situation. Tank Bigsby may carry you into the playoffs. I mean, the schedule for them is so fantastic moving forward. So it's not just the Jets this week, then it's Las Vegas in week 16 and the Titans in week 17. Like, those are all winnable games for Jacksonville if they don't get the phone call to lose the game. So I think for Bigsby, he's a borderline number 2 running back. Taylor might stink. Like, he's just as a talent, not that great. Situation is great. But it like Dave said, it could be a Banacanda this week if they decide to give him more of a look. I doubt it, because it's a short week. But Keyshawn Vaughn, somebody knows the roster, knows the playbook. He was with them in camp. So I don't know. Just the fact that Garendo could play, that's why I have Bigsby higher.
Right, but if Garendo's not practicing on Monday and Tuesday,
they never practice on Monday.
A sprained foot, I'm thinking he's not going to be able to play on Thursday.
Yeah, no, Tuesday's big, but Monday, that's always the designation of what they would have done.
Yeah, I like the situation and the opportunity better for Taylor than I do this week for Bigsby. And say what you will about the Jets' run defense, but they've held running backs to 3.3 yards per carry in their last 4 games. So obviously Achane did a number on them through the air. That's not what Bigsby does. Bigsby still shares with ETN. I love the matchup next week for Bigsby. So if you're doing it for week 16, your eyes are there and not on week 15, then yeah, getting Bigsby makes sense. And Bigsby is the better talent than Patrick Taylor. But the opportunity is just better for potentially for Patrick Taylor.
I think one of the big underrated storylines coming out of week 14 is Bigsby getting 18 carries and Travis Etienne only getting 4. That was really weird. Usually they split more evenly because Etienne had, 13 carries the week before. I guess they haven't played a ton of games where both of them have been like healthy and involved, but that was a big development because I went back and I looked at every Jacksonville game where they've been in either a 1-score loss or a win, and they're usually around 18 to 20 running back carries. So if that's like 14 or 15 of them going to Bigsby, that's a big deal. If it's like 12 to 8 Bigsby to ETN, that's not so good, but all right.
No, and they both played roughly 50% of the snaps. ETN dominated on third downs and inside the 10.
Sincere McCormick is on this list with a very good rush average so far against Denver, Kansas City, and Tampa Bay. 2 great run defenses there. And now he faces the Falcons, who give up 4.5 yards per carry to running backs, but not a lot of touchdowns. And they don't see a lot of carries. And there's Alexander Madison potentially. Isaiah Davis, Jaleel McLaughlin. Dave talked about him as a stash. Kamani Vidal, Jerome Ford. And what about Gus Edwards? I mean, if Gus Edwards were available, would you take him over Sincere McCormick?
No. All he's doing is scoring touchdowns. He scored 2 touchdowns in his last 3 games. He's yet to crack 10 PPR points on the season. So it's just pretty bad. He's got 2 catches on the season. Give Kamani Vidal more work, please. Like your team is struggling right now. A big part of that is because you lost J.K. Dobbins. Vidal is not going to be J.K. Dobbins. Gus Edwards is certainly not going to be J.K. Dobbins. But give the younger, fresher legs. Exactly your point of what you just talked about, Adam, with Dowdle and Chase Brown. Like there's fresh legs here that might be able to do something a little bit different. I don't know if that's the case, but watching Gus Edwards run into the back of his offensive line 9 times a game and maybe fall into the end zone is not the answer.
No, but I don't know how much better Vidal is than Gus.
But let's find out.
Yeah, let's find out. Yeah.
Right. I think the coaches already know.
Maybe. All right, so Roschon Johnson.
And Vidal played more than Gus last week, so maybe that's the sign we need.
I mean, look, playing more than Gus is one thing. Let's get more carries than Gus because he's obviously going to play on third downs over Gus, right? But
let's get a couple catches too. I mean, he had the first game that he played. He had a nice wheel route that he scored a touchdown.
Right. That's kind of gone away.
Roschon Johnson is 44% rostered. He could fall in the end zone if he gets back from the concussion protocol. I did want to ask you about the Commanders running backs, Dave. Any interest in Jeremy McNichols or Chris Rodriguez?
Yeah, McNichols is on the list. He's somebody who could be the 1B back in Washington behind Brian Robinson, could potentially be used in pass down situations. Last time we saw the Commanders play, Rodriguez had a good game. Almost all of his playing time came in the fourth quarter of a blowout win. So I'm a little hesitant to say that Rodriguez is going to be the next man up and not McNichols. But again, I'm not chasing after either of these guys. There are so many other running backs that I'd much rather have. But I don't know how many roster spots you guys have to play with. I don't know how badly you want to back up Brian Robinson. But in either of those cases, if you've got deep spaces and you want to carry some lottery tickets, I think McNichols is the lottery ticket. And obviously the guy you want to have on your bench if Brian Robinson is on your starting lineup.
I did, Adam, on the story on the site, I did a whole list of running back handcuffs. So the Commanders guys are in there, like Corum, like it's just I can't write about all these guys. There's just too many to get to.
Sure.
So I kind of break it down. The ones that will maybe give you some production if they're still playing behind the starter, the ones that are lottery tickets that will help you. There's a lot of sort of ways to pick these guys apart and where they matter. Corum, for example, playing more lately. If you're stuck, desperate, clearly there's some opportunities there. 8 carries each of the last 2 games. But really, it's more of, okay, these guys, if they get a chance to be starters, do you want to stash them now? Okay,
wide receivers. So we like Quentin Johnston and Josh Downs if they're available. Rome Odunze we didn't talk about. He's, I think, 64% rostered. So how would he rank It's Thielen 1, it's Christian Watson 2 right now. If Odunze were part of that picture, where would he be?
He would be behind those guys, and I would put him behind Palmer too if you tell me McConkey's out.
Would you put him behind the Colts guys?
I would put him behind. If Downs plays, I would take Downs over all these guys except for Thielen. And then I would take, with Downs back, I would rather have Odunze over Pittman.
Okay. And yeah, that's it. Cedric Tillman and Elijah Moore. Interest level in them against the Chiefs.
Moore over Tillman. Moore would be at best a number 3 PPR wide receiver.
Okay.
I would take Tillman over Moore just because I think there's a slight upside edge to him based on what we saw earlier in the beginning of Jameis's tenure. So if you're looking for the most upside, I would take Tillman. You're looking for the safer floor, it's Moore.
If I were looking for upside, I wouldn't touch either of these guys.
Romeo,
one guy scored 18 PPR points in 3 games in a row.
I don't know when he's going to play.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, that's clearly a factor. But if you're talking about, again, who's going to give you the highest ceiling, if they are playing, for me, it's
right.
Tillman over.
So, and I'm sure you'd agree that you'd rather go and get a receiver who we've talked about that is going to play, and then you could always double back for Tillman potentially this time next week if he plays.
If Romeo Doubs plays, how much would that affect Christian Watson?
I mean, at this point, I think Christian Watson is what he is. I think it would impact Dontavian Wicks more so than it would, and Tucker Kraft more so than it would Watson. So yep. we've seen. I just know from last week. So the first time that they played Detroit in the rain, he had a 7-target game that led the team in targets. So maybe it's just Detroit that they like using him in that matchup because they feel he can beat that secondary. I just think that we're looking at a guy that is different than everybody else on that team, and so 6-7 targets I think is realistic. I don't think Romeo Doubs changes that. Maybe some red zone opportunities, green zone opportunities that impacts him, but I don't think the return of Romeo Doubs is the reason why we can't have a successful Christian Watson.
I hope you're right. I just feel like I have to bring this up. Christian Watson's played over 90% of the snaps in 2 straight games, and that is super unusual for Christian Watson. It directly coincides with Romeo Doubs being out.
For sure.
But that doesn't mean he can't get the targets when he's on the field, like Amari Cooper did last week, for example. All right, tight ends. By the way, are we done with Marquez Valdez-Scantling?
Yes.
I think so. It's just they have nobody else, and they're probably chasing points here.
I can't feel good about a guy who's so boom or bust with an inferior quarterback.
Yeah, that's certainly a fair concern. But there's, what do you have? 7 targets last week? 9 targets last week? Yeah, a lot for him.
If Pat Freiermuth, MVS at 7. If Pat Freiermuth, Zach Ertz, or Tucker Kraft are available, how many of them would you add over Hunter Henry?
Ertz, for sure. And that's probably it.
It sounds about right.
How many of them would you add over Jake Ferguson?
All of them.
Ertz for sure.
Freiermuth is dependent on picks.
Yeah, Freiermuth wouldn't make it. It's Kraft who I'm debating, and it's a week-to-week thing. Like if you're telling me Dobbs is out again this week, I'm taking Kraft over Ferguson.
Okay. All right, so Henry, Ferguson, Kincaid. We haven't talked about him. Unfortunately, the Lions are the best against tight ends, so that's Kincaid's matchup this week. Juwan Johnson, was getting a little momentum, but screeching halt. Grant Calcaterra against Pittsburgh. Dalton Schultz is interesting to me, but he's got Miami and Kansas City and then Baltimore. So good playoff matchups for him. He's been okay. He's been kind of up and down. Rarely great, but usually okay, Dalton Schultz. And Dave talked about Stone Smart, SMRTT, and SMARTT. And week 15 DSTs, Commanders, Cowboys, Falcons, Packers, Jets. Ravens number 1 if they're available, then Commanders, Cowboys, Falcons, Packers, Jets. Kickers, Will Reichard, Matthew Wright, Justin Tucker, Will Lutz, and Jake Moody. It is weird to have Justin Tucker on a waiver wire list. Okay, we are out of here, folks. Thank you so much to Jamie and Dave, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today.